Who handles cyber and privacy at your enterprise? If your answer is everyone, you're on the right track. From the boardroom to the break room, cyber and privacy is now everybody's business. We truly are all in this together. Who handles cyber and privacy at your enterprise? If your answer is everyone, you're on the right track. From the boardroom to the break room, cyber and privacy is now everybody's business. We truly are all in this together. Who handles cyber and privacy at your enterprise? If your answer is everyone, you're on the right track. From the boardroom to the break room, cyber and privacy is now everybody's business. We truly are all in this together. Who handles cyber and privacy at your enterprise? If your answer is everyone, you're on the right track. From the boardroom to the break room, cyber and privacy is now everybody's business. We truly are all in this together. Who handles cyber and privacy at your enterprise? If your answer is everyone, you're on the right track. From the boardroom to the break room, cyber and privacy is now everybody's business. We truly are all in this together.
Hello and welcome to the World Economic Forum here in Davos. Welcome also to the launch of PwC's 27th annual Global CEO Survey, and a huge apology that we're running late. For those of you who've made it through the weather and the security issues, a big thank you. You'll understand why. We appreciate your patience. And for those of you who are joining us online, thank you so much for waiting. We've had a few logistical issues, let's say, in getting the room together, and indeed in getting the PwC Global Chair, Bob Moritz, through the queues and in the room. He'll be joining us in a minute. Meantime, let me introduce myself. My name is Nisha Pillay, and it's a pleasure to be with you here today. So, Bob and I are going to be sharing with you the highlights of this year's survey, of course. And then Bob will be very happy to take your questions from people here in the room with us, and also from those joining us remotely on the live stream. So we're gathered here in Davos at a time not just of logistical challenges, but challenges on a much greater scale and huge, huge change. Global temperatures, as we all know, are still very much on the rise. And as for the new kid on the block, AI, well, generative AI has the potential to overhaul whole industries. It's also top of mind for CEOs for a very good reason, because they're under immense pressure to rework.
Who handles cyber and privacy at your enterprise?
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. We want to start our program. My name is David Che. I lead the workforce transformation team at PwC Ghana, and I'll be your moderator for this morning. To start with, we want to call on one of our partners, GJJ Fiajo, to come and welcome us properly. Let's give him a hand as he comes up. Thank you.
David, thank you very much. And thank you all for honoring our invitation. So at PwC, we build trust in society and solve important problems. That is our purpose. That is our essence. That is actually the very reason why we exist. And in doing so, we put together teams that bring different perspectives as well as specializations to the kind of work that we do. These teams do not only work with their purpose in mind, what they do as well, they work in a manner so that we all live our purpose. The banking survey team, and by extension, the financial services industry group, is one of such teams. They're made up of people from different specializations, and to name some of them, from deals, consulting, audit, tax, marketing, research, technology, and many, many more. The banking survey team came together and agreed this year to focus on customer experience. Well, actually, looking at it differently, you can argue that it was a no-brainer. After all, they are all customers anyway, aren't they? But let me share just one question that came when I joined the group to conduct the interviews. The simple question was, why customer experience? And I'm just staring at the one who asked the question. And I'll just say simply, it is because it is important. It is because customers are important, and we know that customers equally are important to you. In fact, we knew that before we embarked on the survey, and even more when we sat with you to have those interviews, then we knew how important those customers were to you. As we sit here today, your experience, maybe I should hashtag this, customer experience, for the next 2 hours matters to us at PwC. So please don't hold back. Please give us any feedback that you have. We would definitely like to hear from you. So at the core of today's experience, your experience, I'd like to call it, what we have to share with you today first is the results of the banking customer experience survey. And then secondly, we'll share insights from or maybe the Ghana Banking Sentiment Index. I'll leave the details to the introductions that will occur, and I'm sure that our speakers will take us through very insightful conversations. So for now, I have to say on behalf of the partners and staff of PwC, I welcome you to this place. And given that we are in a hotel, let me just borrow from the industry and say, I wish you a pleasant stay. And even more, I believe that your time and our collective conversations about this all-important business area will be worth the while. Thank you again for honoring our invitation. We appreciate that you are part of this discussion this morning. Thank you.
Thank you, GJJ, for that welcome address. And as he mentioned, there are two main items on our agenda. The first, we want to share with you the PwC Customer Experience Survey results. And then we'll go to the Ghana Banking Sentiment Index presentation. To help us do the first presentation is our leader in Ghana, the country senior partner in the person of Vish Ashalbo. I've known and worked with him for the past 17 years, and I can tell you that he's an epitome of true PwC professional. On that note, shall we, with a hand of applause, welcome Vish to the podium.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for being here. And I think we have an online audience, so good morning to them as well. And thank you to Gigi and David for the introduction. So this morning, my job is quite simple. Like Gigi said, we ran this survey in the early part of the year. And we came to you, the banks, for some input, which we have since published in our banking survey report, which was circulated, I think, early in July. But today, what I have is just a few slides to touch on the key outcomes so that we can share some of that knowledge, maybe get your input, and maybe put it in the right context. But obviously, the full document is there. I'm sure a lot of you would have seen it already. And then, like David said, we have a group of partners who we've worked with to conduct the sentiment index or survey as well, who will present after me. And then following that, to the extent that you find it useful, we can arrange direct one-on-one engagements. So my presentation is actually just going to cover a few points as you see on the screen there. The context, the overview of the methodology that we used in our survey, the key findings, and then we'll look at, it says deep dive, but I'll actually be quite quick because I think that most of you have already seen, and I don't think there are any major surprises in there. It's just the context that we need to consider in a slightly different manner. And then we'll finish off with maybe our point of view on some of the matters that arise from the survey. So customer experience, particularly in the banking industry, is not a new thing. And if I look across the room and the audience that is here and online, a lot of banks, a lot of institutions today have customer experience teams. So it's not new. The issue is that it has evolved and it continues to evolve as the external environment changes. So your customers and what they look for are not the same as what they looked for 2 years ago when we did our first survey in 2022. They are certainly not the same, and in terms of their demands, they are also not the same as 5 years ago, nor will they be the same in the next few years. So we know, and some of you who sit at the executive level in your organizations, we know that you spend quite an amount of time thinking about how to make the experience richer and more rewarding for your customers. And what we are hoping to achieve from this survey is not to tell you that customer experience is important, because you know that already, but to maybe give some indications as to where you might look, where you might focus your time and investment so that you can achieve the most that you can from your CX investments to promote your business. So in terms of methodology, those of you who have followed our banking survey over the last 20 odd years or so will know that we do this in partnership with the Ghana Association of Banks. So I must really thank them enormously for the support that we've received from them, and by extension, the banking sector in our surveys, not just this year, but in all the previous years. So, but this year in particular, the collaboration was a lot stronger because we reached out through the Association of Banks and through the banks themselves to their customer base so that they could give us the kind of feedback we were looking for in terms of what are the things that are important to them. So the methodology that we used is up on the screen. I'm not going to go through every single point. Suffice to say that we reached out to real customers, let me put it that way, and through the efforts, which covered about 2 months, 2.5 months or so, we ultimately were able to get 4,800 or so. And then we also conducted interviews with senior bank executives, some of whom may actually be in the room today. And then we published the report in July, which again, I'm sure all of you would have seen. In terms of demographics of the respondents, just to give you an idea of the type of people who were responding to the survey. And again, this is important because depending on the type of bank that you choose to position yourself as and the type of customer base that you're trying to attract, some of the findings may need to be fine-tuned one way or the other, which is why, again, maybe one-on-one follow-up conversations may be of interest to you. So 62, or let me say about 84%, that's between the retail banking and the SME banking customers. They formed the bulk of the respondents. And I dare say that today, if you look at the banking landscape in Ghana, those are pretty much the target groups that most of the banks seek to attract. Yes, some banks position themselves towards the maybe corporate side of the market, but I think today it's mostly retail and SME that most banks are looking for. In terms of the age groupings, you see that it's basically between the Gen Zs, millennials, and Gen Xs. And actually, I had to look it up this morning because I wasn't sure what falls where. So if you're like me and you're struggling to understand, Gen Z apparently are people between the age of 12 to 27. I'm not sure we surveyed anybody at the lower end of that range, but 12 to 27 is Gen Z, and then millennials are 28 to 43 years of age. And then the Gen Xs are 44 to 59. So essentially, the bulk of the respondents, Gen Z, millennials, Gen Xs, are ranging, let's say, up to about 59 years of age or so. And as you can probably relate to, this is probably the core, how do I put it? Maybe the economic actors, that age band. So we feel that the results are quite representative. And then if you look at the income bands, I don't know whether you can see, but it's ranging from about 1,000 cedis. I think these are monthly income numbers. The highest bar, the 40%, is those between 1,000 just up to about 5,000 cedis. And then the 20% is 5 to 10,000, and then it goes on from there. So just to give you an idea of the 4,800, what the demographics are in terms of their responses. Now, here, I don't think there'll be any surprises here. Everybody today prefers to use digital. So for the last, I can't remember how many years, we've always said that banking is moving towards digital and less on the brick and mortar. But it's important to note that branch networks are still important. So if you look at the responses that came in terms of the preferred channels for doing banking, it does confirm that digital is the preferred channel, but a significant minority, 27% is not insignificant, a significant minority still want that contact and still want to walk into a branch to conduct their business. So we must not overlook that. We're not at the level of some more developed economies where pretty much everything is digital. We're not there yet. And then in terms of the digital preferences, it's the almighty mobile app that's basically everybody, well, I shouldn't say everybody, most people want to use. You can see there that internet banking has reduced significantly, as has other modes. So the mobile apps are clearly, by a long shot, the preferred means of doing business. Now, key findings from the survey, and I'm going to be very quick on this because I think you've probably seen this. Now, what is interesting from this slide is not so much the top 5, but I mean, I'll touch on the top 5, which are speed, or this. Let me take a step back and say this, or these 5 things are what the customers rated highest. So speed, predictability, expertise, easy access, and engaged employees. These are the 5 things they rated highest. But those things are not too surprising because it's kind of always been like that. It's always been the case that customers are looking for speed, not just in banking, but pretty much in every service sector. But what is more interesting, at least from my perspective, is if you compare it to 2022, and then I'll just ask you to focus on somewhere in the middle of the slide where it talks about engaged employees, for example. Staff must show interest in my business. 24% in 2024 as opposed to 35% in 2022. So you see a major shift. And then you look at the one below that talks about always on. My bank must be available in time I need it. 34% in 2022 to 22% in 2024. What's that beginning to tell us? That's beginning to tell us that the customer wants to control their own narrative. So what they're saying is that, okay, give me speed, give me predictability, bring your expertise to bear when I need it, give me ease of access. Whether your employees are interested in my business or not, yes, it's kind of good, but I'm interested in my business. So if you give me the tools that I need to do my transactions, I'm okay, right? And always on, my bank must be available. Well, if you give me those other items, for example, easy access, I can do largely what I want to do. Now remember that this is basically on the transaction side of banking. So we're not talking here about the additional services that banks provide, like advisory services or technical assistance, etc. That's a slightly different dynamic, but this is for your day-to-day banking transactions. So as I said, what is interesting here is not so much that the top 5 are there, but the fact that things are slowly and gradually changing. Like we said earlier, the external environment keeps changing. So if you are thinking about the experience of your customers, you need to be in tune to what is changing. Obviously without losing focus on the top 5, which I will touch on now. So, waiting times in branches. Again, this is just an interesting statistic. It may give you some thoughts as to how you organize your business. But most customers, in this case, what's that? That's about 60% or so, do not want to spend more than 10 minutes in your branch. Now, that's an interesting statistic because over the years, most banks have moved to digital. But like I said earlier, a significant minority still want that branch experience. And so, but when they come to the branch, they really don't want to spend any more than 10 minutes. Of course, some people, are more patient than others, but 10 minutes, maybe 15 minutes is maybe the maximum tolerable level if you really want to deliver a good experience to your customers. And then predictability. Predictability here, we're talking about customers being able to assess when a particular service or a particular transaction can be done. Not just in terms of, for example, a decision relating to availability of a certain product, but how predictable is it that a payment or a transaction can get done within, 5 minutes, within, if it's an international transaction, maybe a bit longer. They just want that predictability. And in order to assess that, they want to interact with the people who know, knowledgeable employees. And they want the branch processes to facilitate predictability. Again, so that they can plan. And I think all of us in our day-to-day lives can relate to it. And then the technology must work. The technology must be error-free, and then it must be on. So what they don't like is when they go to the app and then for some reason it's down and then they can't process their transactions and that they just cannot predict whether it will be up or down. Customers just don't like that. They like the predictability. Knowledgeable employees, very important. So where customers engage with bank employees, they just want to get the right information and be informed about the right processes. So they want to know that if I want to apply for a particular product, this is the process. They want to know that if I'm applying for the product, these are the features of the product. Then they can go away and make their own decisions, and then they can get on with their lives. If you look at the other indicators here about expertise, yes, friendliness, politeness, respect, interest in my business, all of those things are important as well. But the primary areas of interest for customers is product knowledge and process knowledge. Again, so that they can make their own decisions and move along with their lives. For banks, obviously, what this means is that more investment in building the capacity of staff so that turnaround times, TAT stands for turnaround times, can also improve to meet customers' expectations and therefore have a good customer experience. I guess easy access, we don't need to dwell on it. Any of us can relate to that. Availability, uptime. There's nothing more frustrating than going to an ATM over the weekend and find that it's not working, especially if you've had to drive around to look for 4 or 5 and none of them are working. And as we discussed earlier, the apps, etc. So always on is a big thing for customers these days. And again, remember the demographics of the customer base that we're looking at today, the Gen Zs, the millennials, etc., etc. Speed and ease of use is also critical for the market today. So digital channels are nice, but you need to make them work and you need to make them friendly so that they can be easily used and then they can facilitate error-free transactions. Ease of access, this is an interesting one. Most of the customers want to interact with their banks and to do business using social media. Now, again, this is a reflection, obviously, of what has happened in our environment over time with the significant explosion of social media, especially for the younger customers. And WhatsApp is the preferred by far. As to why, I'm not entirely sure. All I can say is that maybe all of us are maybe used to engaging on WhatsApp. But when you look at the other platforms that are there, for whatever reason, WhatsApp stands tall. Now, banking is a regulated industry. Can banks suddenly start interacting with their customers or more than that, doing transactions using WhatsApp? I don't know. Maybe it's a conversation that together with the central bank, banks maybe need to look at. And here it's about engagement with staff, okay? I don't think there's too much difference between what we try to do here is to look at the demographics again in terms of what customers are saying, depending on whether they are younger, slightly older, whether they are more or less affluent, and whether they are either retail or corporate clients. I mean, the differences are not too much. So, for example, if you look at the generations, between 24 to 25%, not too significant. Everybody seems to want to deal with staff who are engaged. And it's not unusual. It's not a banking industry per se. I guess in any service organization, customers will want to deal with staff who are engaged. So again, the important thing there is about how banks upskill and train their staff so that the contact with the customer can be as engaging as possible. Sorry, that's a quick run through. Like I said, we can always come back and explore any further areas that you want to. I'm running through because I think that the report has been available and maybe you may have seen it. But if there's anything you want to explore further, by all means. I'd like to wrap up my particular presentation with a few points. And these are our points of view as PwC. I'm not going to run through all of this. The slide is in two parts, some insights on the left and our point of view and what we think are the key takeaways for your organization. So I'll focus on what we think the key takeaways are. So basically, from everything we see and hear from our survey, as well as from what you will hear in the upcoming presentation, digital continues to be the preferred channel. There's no doubt about that. But we need to look carefully and ensure that things like uptime and what we're describing as frictionless, basically ease of use, must be a key feature of whatever digital offering that you're giving your customers. So it's not just about investing in the technology. It's about making it reliable and making it easy to use. So that's why we're saying that we need to upskill. Banks need to upskill their staff to support customers through the digital migration journey. We all know how it is. When you get confronted with any software or piece of technology, your own limitations may take you to a point where you decide the thing doesn't work. But it may actually work. Maybe you are not doing the right thing. So to the extent that banks can support their customers to get in tune with the platforms, the technology that they are deploying, so much the better. That's an area to be looked at. In terms of predictability, what we're saying is that increasingly intelligent tech, now today everywhere you go, people talk about Gen AI, machine learning, etc., etc. Those are also very relevant to the banking sector. I don't need to elaborate or belabor the point. I think you know that better than me. But I think use of some of these tools can help the banks to enhance the customer experience. We've already touched on staff upskilling and training, not just on reducing the time that your customer spends in the branch. Because again, remember that there's still a significant minority who want to engage through the branches. Expertise, I guess it's obvious. You must position those who know what they are talking about in front of the customer, so that the customer gets the requisite information, allows you, the bank, to manage their expectation, but then also allows them to do their business in the shortest possible time. And obviously that comes with training whilst obviously you're ensuring that you're complying with regulation, because we cannot get away from the fact that banks are regulated. And then ease of access, I'll only touch on the issue about working with the regulator, because I know that it's always a balance. Banks are trying to give the customers as much as they're asking for. The regulator is trying to make sure that the industry does not get itself into trouble. So it's a question of continuous dialogue and engagement, and making sure that the safeguards that you agree with the regulator are appropriate, whilst you're able to give the customers the experience that they're looking for. Engage staff. I think banks really, and it's not just banks, although we're talking about banks in this instance. In a service industry, you need to put yourself on the other side of the table or in the customer's shoes and understand the journey that they go through when they want a particular service or when they want a particular product. That's what we mean by the journey maps. And you need to map that out and also compare that to your internal processes. And then make sure that your internal processes are such that they are actually enabling the customer experience. Of course, you must retain control, your regulated industry, etc. But we must not lose sight of the fact that what you do internally can affect the customer experience. And some of those processes, maybe you could do it differently and deliver a better customer experience. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your time. This is a very, very quick run through. I think what we'd like to do now is to pause here. If there are any quick questions, we will take them and try and respond to them before we get into the next presentation, which takes a slightly different perspective, but is also focusing on the customer experience. So, David, I'll hand it back to you for now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Vish. So we want to take a few questions, 2 or 3. I'm sure it will be very quick, so you can indulge us. Can we have some questions? And just raise your hand, give us your name, where you are from, and then you give us your question. Where do we start from? Sometimes we volunteer people, but I'm sure you raise your hand. Any question? Okay, we have a hand there. Thank you. Your name, where you are from, and your question.
My name is Linda Ackman, and I work with Standard Chartered Bank. And we've been doing this survey for some years. That's what I picked. And I wanted to know what the trend has been over the years. Is the experience for the clients getting better, or it's going from bad to worse?
Thank you.
And then maybe possibly if we observe some consistencies in the customer's concerns over the period.
Okay.
Thank you.
Maybe let's have another question, then Vish can take the 2 of them. Any other hand? Okay, Vish, you can take this.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for the question. So, 2 things. We do a banking survey every year, but it's not always on the customer experience. So there are other organizations that do surveys around, you might call them experience. Normally it's around customer satisfaction and things like that. But we did do something similar in 2022. So I don't know, can you put the presentation up? If I can just go back to one of the slides that I showed earlier. Okay, thank you. So to answer your question about experience over the period, I guess the best I can do for now is to use this particular slide to illustrate. So 2022 outcomes are on the right, and then the bar chart on the left is what came out of the 2024 survey. So in terms of consistency, yes, the issues around speed of service, predictability, expertise, ease of access, those are consistent, right? So customers still look forward to these as key attributes of a good customer experience. But the slight changes that are emerging are more around, as I said before, the middle of the chart where you have always on, pleasant employees, frictionless digital channels, etc., etc. Because as the demographics change, the demographics around us in terms of not just the environment, but the tools that are available, then people are relying less on maybe the bank's own employees. They want to make their own decisions, but they want to engage in a simpler, faster way. So they don't need to come and sit necessarily in the branch to have a discussion about how to manage their finances, for example. They feel they know how to manage their finances. They just want you to give them the tools and ease of access so that they can go off and manage the finances the way they want. That's not 100%, I hasten to add. There are people who still want the service of being able to come and sit with somebody to talk through their finances. But with everything else that's available today, the explosion of information, knowledge, the internet and all of that, people are more empowered to make their own decisions. And so all they are saying is give us the tools, give us people who know what the process is, who know the design of the product, and give me speed, then I'll make my own decisions. So I don't know, I hope that answers your question somewhat, yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Louisa Laye from CBG. Those were some interesting revelations Vish just shared. And it is not surprising at all that digital banking is the most preferred across all the generations. But we do not, as banks, we depend a lot on the internet service providers as well. Not too long ago, Ghana and a few other African countries experienced a total internet blackout, and everybody was stranded, not sure what was happening and all of that. Now, the digital services in the banks are pretty much contingent on the internet efficiency of our geographical space. I'm not too sure that we have any of the telcos represented here or the internet service providers also represented here, because we work together with them for our efficiency as banks. So if they're here, I'm not too sure what they have to contribute to this particular discourse in terms of our uptimes, the uptimes of the banks in our digital offerings.
Yes, that's a very important point. And, well, I don't know whether there are any ISPs in the room, but I guess from a banking perspective, you ordinarily, you see, when we talk about processes, you would presumably have things like service level agreements, etc., with your ISPs and other service providers. I know that does not help where there's a failure, because you'd be losing business. But these are some of the things that one needs to think about. So, like I said, maybe towards the end of the presentation, sometimes you have certain internal, and in this case external, because you're relying on a third party, internal or external stakeholders who go through certain processes. Those processes impact on your customers and the experience that you have. So as you think about your business and what is important, and of course the customer is king, then you need to extend your thinking to some of these matters you've just raised. It may be for a lot of us, it was a rude awakening in whenever it was a few months ago, when suddenly we couldn't get anything done. So basically, I agree with everything you've said. Your training of those staff who may not necessarily be your direct employees, how do you get them upskilled to the point where they are able to give your customers the best experience that they can for the benefit of your business? So yes, it's not just the bank per se, but basically all the other stakeholders around the bank.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Right, so mine is a quick one. I wanted to know from the survey, well, this is Daniel, PwC transactions. I wanted to know from the survey, are you able to tell the extent to which banks leverage technology in shaping and implementing their CS strategy?
Not directly, if I understand your question, right? What we've seen, not just from this survey, but over the last number of years, is that together with other businesses, banks have invested a lot in technology. But the big question is the technology that banks have invested in, are they really giving the customer the experience that was intended when those investments were made? That is why things like ease of use, always on, flexibility, and even knowledgeable bank staff who can help train the customers becomes important. So it's not all about the technology itself. It's also about the softer things around the technology, because you're talking about an experience, a customer experience, and that's a soft thing. So you can go and buy a piece of hardware, you can go and buy a piece of software, but how that translates into the experience that the customer has is more the issue. So that link between the investments that banks are making and the experience that their customers are getting, which in turn impacts on the business, is really where the issue is today. So what we seek to do is to highlight some of the things that customers are looking for so that banks have the opportunity to look at how to address those. And that does not necessarily involve going to buy additional hardware or software. So I know I've not answered your question directly, but there's a little bit of an intangible link between buying the equipment and the customer experience. And the link in between is the service element. And that's where we think banks need to focus. I think there was a question here, and then...
Thank you very much. My name is Henrietta Duho, Universal Merchants Bank. And I would want to know whether you were able to pick up sentiments around security. Are the customers satisfied? Do they feel comfortable if they use the digital platforms? Do they feel comfortable that the banks have secured platforms such that their funds are safe? I know that was not the direct focus, but it will be interesting to know this kind of information. Thank you.
Yes, I think, thank you for that. I think security is clearly a factor. From what I presented, you didn't see security standing out because I think that by default, most customers believe that the security exists, being a regulated business, etc. But I think the next presentation has some interesting indicators as to, because that is talking about, and the word that you used is right, sentiment. The next presentation touches on sentiment. And you'll see from the sentiment data that when certain things happened in the market that gave cause for concern, maybe not directly security related, then customers react. But on a normal business as usual day-to-day basis, it is not really the highest thing on the customer's mind because they believe and trust that being a regulated business, you will be secure. But obviously if there's an incident, then you will see an immediate reaction. So it's a double-edged sword in that regard. So I think the lady there wanted to ask.
Thank you very much. It was indeed a very interesting presentation. Thank you. I wanted to touch on the question that the gentleman at the back asked about strategy and technology when it comes to driving CX. I think the little research that has been done from MySpace proves that because most Ghanaian banks are working with legacy systems, it is very difficult to build up on it to drive CX. What is happening is, in an ideal situation, normally the journey, like you talked about, should be mapped out. The processes would align to the journeys before we even look at technology. When it comes to CX strategy or transformation from a banking perspective or any other perspective. However, we are not in an ideal world. And so what is happening is that we already have the legacy systems, or executives decide to purchase technology based on the fact that it's the ish, without really thinking about how it is going to align to our processes and the journey, because it is the journey that delivers on the experience to the customer. And this is the point that lacks, but I'm sure that customer experience is still quite new in Ghana. From my perspective, we've always driven service, which is the softer aspect. But the core aspect of CX, which is strategic and transformative, is still quite young in Ghana. And as we grow, thanks to the likes of PwC giving us the insights we need, trying to engage with board and management, these decisions will start changing so that when we are getting new systems, we are not just getting systems because it is the thing that everybody is using, but we'll get it based on feedback from our customers, what they need, or what our brand stands for. We invest in these tools or technology to drive the experience for the customers. So it will be very unique based on our brand and our vision as an organization. That was to answer the gentleman's question.
Okay, thank you.
Yes. What I wanted to talk about is, I know we touched on a lot of digital, but I did not see anything on self-service. Most of the time, the app is just for transaction, it's very transactional.
Yes.
But I know that most customers want to be able to handle things themselves, like self-onboarding on the app, opening accounts on the app. If I have a challenge, complaining on the app, service recovery process through the app, communication, customer communication, touching the customer through this particular channel. I want to know if, when you were engaging with both the customers and also management, the managers of CX in the various banks, if anything came out strongly on self-service and communication, and lastly on service recovery to drive CX.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much for those 2 points, and absolutely spot on. I think the first one, I won't belabor the point. You've explained it clearly. The second one, yes, that's all embedded in people wanting to be able to use an app as seamlessly as possible. So yes, what I showed here was just a quick run through, but I think you're absolutely right. Part of the report, I think, goes into a little bit more detail as to what the customers actually want. And like I said in the course of the presentation, essentially what they want is to be given the tools, the knowledge, the information, and then they'll do their own thing, right? Whether it's onboarding, as you said, whether it's a query, a complaint, they want to do it digitally, but you just give me the tools, the facilities, and I'll run my own show. Not 100%, because some people still want the branch experience, but to that extent, you're absolutely right. Thank you for that point.
Hello. Okay, so my name is Ebenezer from First Atlantic.
Okay.
From First Atlantic Bank.
Yes.
So I'm not surprised about some of the numbers we've seen this morning, the growth of digital platforms. But also in our interaction with customers, we see that there are also a good number of people who do not want to have anything to do with digital, especially when it comes to people who are perhaps not so educated. I know that Bill Gates once said that in future we will not have any brick and mortar. Do you think that the growth of digital will sort of be impacted by the level of education we have in this country? And for the people who are not so educated, how do you think the banks should position themselves so that they can serve these people also in a meaningful way?
So thank you for that question, and I think it's right. When I showed the demographics in the course of the presentation, I kind of showed, I didn't show level of education, but I did say that most banks in Ghana today, unless you tell me I'm wrong, are focusing on either the retail or the SME as a means of growth. And I did say that some banks choose, depending on what your strategy is, to focus on maybe the corporate segment of the market. So to your point, depending on who your target customer base is, or your predominant customer base, if that is where you choose to stay, you need to have a strategy that aligns with it. So the digital discussion or digital solutions may not work entirely. I think they're still relevant, but the degree to which you deploy digital may differ from bank A to bank B, depending on your customer base and what your strategy is. For example, if you have today a customer base that is largely not educated, you may want to migrate them, and therefore gradually you may be deploying more and more digital tools. If you choose to retain the same customer base, then obviously your branch strategy may need to be more prominent, or maybe as prominent as your digital strategy. So there isn't a one-size-fits-all. Basically, everything boils down to your own business strategy and identifying who your target customers are and how best you can service them and what their needs are. So that is why for the survey, we kind of put the demographics up front, so you know, you have a feel for the type of people who are responding to the questions. Bear in mind that the survey was gathering data electronically, so I guess it wouldn't so much include those people who are not using digital today, or unless maybe some people help them to fill out the forms. But your point is very important, that we shouldn't leave this discussion thinking that it's a one-size-fits-all. At the end of the day, it's a strategic discussion that executives need to look at, understanding their business, understanding their strategy, and being very clear in their minds what their target group of customers is looking for. I hope that clarifies. Okay. So thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for your attention. I'll hand it back to David.
Thank you, Vish. We can do better. We can do better. Thank you, Vish. Thank you, Vish. To our next presentation, and if the team can project to us, the team is online, so we would have our tech team help us to show the presentation. So we have, as Vish mentioned, collaborated with Data EQ to do the sentiment survey. And to do the presentation to us is Head of Client Strategy, Liska Kloppers. And as we can see, Liska serves as Head of Client Strategy at Data EQ, a company focused on transforming unstructured online customer interactions into high-quality, actionable data. Combining her passion for data analysis with a keen interest in risk and compliance, Liska has worked with top companies in the FS sector across South Africa to enhance their customer outcome and experience. So we hand over to Liska to do the presentation for us. Once she's done, we open it up for questions. Thank you. Liska, over to you.
Thank you, David. Can everybody see my screen? Okay, it looks like it's displaying on your side. Please just let me know if you're not able to see it. Thank you very much for your time and attention and for inviting us to this forum. It's a privilege to be here. On the call with me is James and Teboko. James is our Business Development Director, and Teboko is the wonderful analyst who put this research together. As was briefly shared, at Data EQ, our core business is working directly with large entities to help them understand their voice of customer, and for that to be strategically used to impact specifically customer experience and improve how customers are treated and compliance against various sort of frameworks in different regions. So we work directly with entities, including regulators in different regions. Over the years, we've found it very valuable to do industry-wide research. So we've done that for about, I think, 6 or 7 years now, with different industries in different markets, and we then publish that as a value add for our clients, but also as a way to engage with new clients and in new regions. This index is the first of its kind in Ghana. We draw a bit from some of the other indices that we've done in other markets, as we'll show you briefly. It will be publicly released at the end of September. So today's session is really to give you a high-level view of what we are going to be talking about when we set up these presentations with you. And it gives us time between now and the end of September to do so. So at the end of today's presentation, please liaise with Kwame or Reynolds to set up those calls. We would love to meet with you. Before we go into the study itself, I'm going to quickly just take you through our methodology, what the data is that you're looking at and how we've structured it. We typically, as I've said, when we work directly with entities, we draw from a range of different data sources, including internal sources and external publicly available sources. For research that we publish, we limit that to publicly available data, specifically social media. So unlike the survey that you've looked at now, which asks specific questions to get a response, what we're analyzing here is the unsolicited organic conversation that people just share online. So they've had an experience with their brand. They might be responding to content that the brand themselves have put out, and we analyze that response or that feedback about their experience to start to get an understanding of where the pain points are and benchmark entities within the market. Over the last 17 years, we've developed a very unique way of structuring this data. It draws from a combination of human and artificial intelligence. We call our human intelligence the crowd. These are people that we've trained over the years to structure data as we want them to. AI can obviously do a lot of that, but when you're dealing with the African context in particular, where we have a lot of mixed languages, that can prove to be less accurate. Our crowd is over 80% multilingual, and so we can accurately structure all African languages, and specifically where there is mixed language or references to local events or use of colloquial language. What you're looking at here are the structures that we ask the crowd to tag the data with. So sentiment obviously is the first step. How does the consumer feel about the entity that they're talking about? We then also look for areas of risk. This could pertain to operational or reputational risk. So either something that's been published in the news, somebody else talking about someone else's experience, or direct experiences, as was brought up, things like digital security or discrimination, things like that would all be within that risk bucket. And then we want to hone in on the customer experience, the actual engagement with the entity itself and where those pain points are. So to do that, we look at the journey stage of that customer, if we can identify where they are in that journey, or if they're giving general feedback or asking for assistance and specifically referring to interactions with the brand. As I go through, and as we'll unpack in the report when we meet with the different banks, we focus then on what we call operational sentiment. So sentiment that is driven by the operational pain points or the customer experience, as opposed to reputational sentiment, which is often driven by things like campaigns or competitions that historically these platforms have been used for. As was alluded to earlier, customers are wanting to use these social channels more and more for service and direct engagements with their brands. So we want to focus specifically on that and unpack where the opportunities are to improve. Within that, we want to then identify where people give feedback about a channel. So where have they been to a branch, where they've had issues with the call center, with the mobile app, whatever it might be. We have industry-specific topic schemas that unpack the why this person is positive or negative, and I'll speak to that on the next slide. And then we've got sort of bespoke categories that we look at in different markets. For this index, we have mapped complaints against the ICRO's goals to get a better understanding of consumer protection and fair treatment within the Ghanaian banking industry. And then lastly, ESG, we'll touch on that very briefly and see what sort of conversations are coming out there with that being a growing concern. So our topics methodology is quite unique. It's not keyword clustering. We are looking for specific themes that are driving conversation. Those are bucketed into the 8 broad categories that you can see there: customer experience, physical facilities, digital experience, etc. These are not mutually exclusive. often consumers will speak about more than one issue. You know, if they're trying to deal with some sort of account admin, but the customer service is not meeting their expectations, that can drive sort of negative conversations. So we delve into those as well in the study. Lastly, before we jump into the findings, the nature of this conversation, as I've alluded to, historically has had a lot of campaign and reputational sort of PR and marketing type initiatives. With these platforms becoming more and more used for online service, it's important for service teams to be able to have tools that help them find the priority conversation, the conversation that they actually need to have line of sight of and respond to. So specifically where consumers are showing an intent to purchase or interest in a product or service, where they are unhappy and wanting to cancel or threatening to cancel, so mitigating churn and responding there. General service, requests for assistance or customer feedback, and then obviously the big bank of risk type conversation where brands need to make a decision on how and if they respond to that type of conversation. So we delve into a response analysis for the industry, and we're focusing then specifically on this. So cancelling out of all the noise. You know, what is the prevalence of this priority conversation of how much consumers are using it for service, and how are brands responding to that? How much of that is being responded to and how much is being missed? Okay, the entities that are included in this study, we've just quickly got those up on the screen for you. For those that are in the room today, please reach out to us and let us know. As I said, this study will be published, and we'd love to give you line of sight of these findings before it is made public. Okay, so benchmarking the Ghanaian banking industry against other markets that we have done similar research in. You can see the net sentiment expressed towards banks in the 6 regions that are on your screen here. So by net sentiment, what we mean is taking all the praise and all the compliments and thanks that consumers express online, and we deduct all the complaints and the negativity and see where we net out. So for 3 of the industries or 3 of the markets in review, South Africa, Kenya, and Ghana, have net positive sentiment, which means that they have more praise and thanks coming at them from their consumer base than they have complaints and negativity. You can see Saudi Arabia having equal portions of both, so coming out net neutral. And UAE and significantly in the United Kingdom, we see a lot of negativity there, more complaints and more unhappy customers in that market. So the previous slide, we saw the overall public net sentiment, which is this 10% that you're looking at here. So an overall net positive of 10%. I've touched on the fact that we're looking at 2 camps of data here. One is the reputational PR marketing type initiatives, which we refer to as reputational sentiment, and then there's the operational feedback that alludes to customer experience. So on the left of the screen, you can see the proportion of those 2. So there's predominantly conversation about reputational initiatives, over 77%, and just shy of 23% signifies customer experience feedback. And on the right side, you can see the sentiment expressed in those 2 sets of conversations. At an industry level, we're seeing that overall net positivity of 10% driven by reputational efforts. So reputational sentiment sitting at a net positive of almost 22%, and operational feedback negative at 23.5%. So customer experience a lot more negative, and that's specifically what we want to unpack in the research. When we present this research, we'll obviously look at the overall share of voice, what the themes were that were driving that conversation and which banks stood out, and why. We'll unpack the sentiment within that for each of the banks in review. So you can see the industry sentiment there sitting at positive 10, and you can see 7 of those banks above that industry net average net positive, and 6 of them below, 3 of them still net positive, and 3 net negative for this period in review. If we then benchmark the reputational sentiment alone in the market, so you can see that positive almost 22% that we looked at earlier for Ghana, compared to Kenya and South Africa. Kenya very positive, around in response to campaign activities and things. Similarly, in South Africa, Saudi Arabia, and UAE, I think this is not surprising. Those campaigns and that type of conversation is designed to drive this kind of engagement. Surprisingly, we see net negative in the UK. So I think that the customer experience there is having an impact on their reputation as well. So there's only so much that they can do to swing that needle. When it comes to reputational sentiment per brand, we also would then benchmark those for each bank in review. You can see the positive industry sentiment there, and 6 of the brands above that net for this period. But all banks net positive in Ghana. Focusing on operational sentiment, again, benchmarking Ghana against other markets. You see South Africa, the only one there with a net positive feedback around operation and customer experience, whereas the rest all have net negative sentiment expressed to the customer experience and operational pain points. Ghana, the best of a bad bunch there, if I can put it that way. So while net negative, less negative than other markets in review. In the research, we will also unpack that per brand, so operational net sentiment performance across the industry per brand. And you can see there's quite a wide range of feedback and sentiment expressed here, everything from almost negative 60% up to a positive 7%, with 2 banks that have a net positive sentiment expressed to them, and thanks from their consumer base. We'll then unpack that in a lot more detail, delving into the root cause analysis. What is driving that sentiment? At an industry level, these are the actual results. So the top drivers of sentiment, you can see them ranked by volume of conversation on the left. So the biggest driver of conversation is products, and second to that is account admin. Third is customer service. And then the sentiment on the right-hand side within each. So account admin, customer service, and transactions driving a lot of that negativity. Products less so, a little more feedback that's positive around products. And again, we'll unpack that in a lot more detail and give insights into each brand. So the deep dives include products and pricing, customer service, and digital experience, as we've touched on. I've also mentioned that we look at a response analysis. So this is the industry sort of summary of that view. On the left-hand side, you can see the proportion of priority conversation. So about 80% of what is happening online is this sort of marketing campaign type conversation or noise that customer service agents need to sift through to be able to find the data and the posts that they need to respond to. So that's about 20% across the industry. And you can see it's quite a range for each bank in review, everything from just over 1% up to 21%, meaning there's a lot of noise that these agents need to get through, and they really need adequate tools to be able to treat these platforms as service platforms, identify where those posts are, and then respond timeously and appropriately. Benchmarking the responsiveness of the Ghanaian banks against other markets, you can see they have the lowest response rate. So 30% of those priority posts are seeing a response from the brand. I just want to pause there and say that what we're looking at here is publicly available data. I'm just going to reiterate that. Often what we find is that banks or insurers or telcos or whoever we're dealing with will respond privately. So a consumer might put out a post expressing an issue or needing support or help, and it will directly go to a DM, which means that 70% that seemingly goes unanswered on public platforms could be getting a response, but it seems to the general public like it's not. So there's a best practice there that perhaps also needs to be looked at. But you can see South Africa not far off from that, sitting at 31%, the UK, Saudi Arabia, UAE, and then the most responsive being Kenya at double the Ghanaian stat there. We'll also unpack various drivers within that, pain points like transactional fees for transfers and unexpected fees, things that drive a lot of negativity, things around pricing, etc. What you're looking at here is risk that seems to be driven by downtime, online downtime and services, and we've touched on this with some of the questions as well. Not just eroding the trust, but actually driving risk. Consumers accusing the banks of being unethical, them paying for services that they can't access or use. And we see that coming through across things like app issues, transactional issues, third-party processes like Momo, and then lack of support. So that's that sort of service angle. And I think, to the question earlier, I think it's a really valid point that the focus on customer service to improve the overall customer experience is one-sided. That's one part of the customer experience. All of these aspects have a significant impact on the customer experience and the trust between consumer and brand. And lastly, we will look at what we call our governance sort of set of categories. We touched on this briefly in the beginning. So looking at risk, looking at environmental, social, and governance themes, and then also mapping the conversation against the consumer protection or market conduct sort of frameworks in the region. We've done a lot of work around this in the South African market, working with the FSCA and their Treating Customers Fairly framework. We're doing some work in the UK using their consumer duty framework, and obviously rolling this out in other regions. For this particular study, we mapped the conversation against the goals that the ICRO from the Bank of Ghana have put out. So specifically looking at consumer protection, we want to quantify how many sort of consumer complaints there are, what's driving them, delving into customer service, looking at fair treatment and advice, reports of fraud and scams, digital security, things like that. And obviously where there are opportunities for consumer education off the back of that. So very briefly, at an industry level, we're seeing 85% of negative conversation online is specific to customer experience and is deemed sort of a complaint, as the ICRO would look at it, and we'd obviously then look at that per bank as well. In terms of environmental, social responsibility and governance, the Ghanaian market had one of the highest prevalences of this, which was quite interesting. Over 17% of the conversation was relevant to one of these themes. A lot of that being driven by social responsibility, and we've kind of touched on that as I've gone through this high-level overview, with consumer protection, consumer treatment, customer service, and specifically with banks and financial service providers, that the nature of the product and service being so crucial and fundamental to their livelihoods and their ability to function and go about their day-to-day lives. That social responsibility then spilling over here, which is what we've looked at. But a lot of that also coming through around governance type conversations. We saw a lot of banks putting out various corporate social responsibility initiatives, empowering SMEs, women-led businesses, engaging in other sort of community initiatives. A lot of that really positively received. So you can see that positive sentiment there of 72%. So a lot of, I think, of learnings for some, and pulling out the banks that are leading the way in this area. I'm going to leave it there. We look forward to engaging with you individually. Please feel free to ask questions or comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Liska. Yes, thank you very much. I want to take questions. Before then, however, I want to draw attention to the QR code. If you have not yet scanned it, please do, to register as well as give us feedback on what is happening today. And most importantly, in case you are interested in us making the presentation to you, you notice we have anonymized the report for confidentiality purposes, but we are available and willing to engage each bank that participated to do a drill down session for you. So please make your request once you scan the code. Yes, want to take questions? The team, if you can please go around and pass the microphones on. Can we see your hand if you have a question? Anyone with any question yet? Okay, I don't see. Okay, I see a hand here. Thank you.
All right. My name is Ruth from First Atlantic. Thank you for the presentation. My question is, I was surprised to see that on ESG, the sentiment for social is negative. And from the presentation you did earlier, I guess the respondents were mainly millennials. So I would like to know if there were reasons behind that.
If there are reasons behind the ESG?
Social sentiment being negative.
Okay. Liska, not sure whether you got that. The question, you got it?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
So the data we're looking at is not surveys. We haven't targeted any sort of particular group of people. We're looking at any conversation that any consumer has expressed online. So where they are talking about an initiative or giving feedback or engaging with brand communication around any one of those issues. For social responsibility, we are looking at human rights, diversity, social responsibility and the kind of impact on their livelihoods, as well as ethical business practices when it comes to how consumers are treated. And so in the feedback that we see online, we see a lot of accusations of consumers being treated unethically by their banks, specifically complaints around missing funds or unauthorized charges on their accounts, alleged fraudulent activity, and things like downtime where systems and services are not available and that they're having that impact on their livelihoods. So whatever initiatives and investments are being made in the social responsibility sort of place and social initiatives, that's being overshadowed by the negativity in terms of customer experience and the expectation from consumers around how they are treated. Does that answer your question?
Please, does that answer your question? Okay, thank you. Any other question? Okay, I see a hand here. The online audience, please put your questions in the chat and we pick them up. Thank you.
Okay, so my name is Albert from Standard Chartered. Thanks very much for the presentation. It's quite revealing to note that when you compare the net positive sentiment, effectively the sentiments for the African market, SA, Kenya, Ghana, to UK and UAE, we seem to be ahead of the curve. Is there any kind of insight to the correlation with the sophistication of the banking system, i.e. products that are offered, the number of bank population and all that? Because our banking system is still, if you compare to those countries, I think they may seem to probably be ahead. And so if there is a kind of negative net sentiment, is there more to it because of the field that they are playing relative to our banking system? Yeah.
Thank you, Liska. You got that?
Thank you.
Okay.
Yes, I think I got it. A very good question and one I've thought of myself. I think it's possibly a more complex answer than I might be able to satisfy you today, but I'm going to give you some of my thoughts. On the one hand, in the UK market, there seems to be a lot of conversation around fraud and digital security. So I don't know if they are potentially targeted more, that that's more prevalent, or that consumers are just noticing it and reporting it more. Which I think then makes me think, and this is really just my thought, this is not in the data, it's something that we would have to delve into and unpack, but it could come down to consumer education, consumer expecting more from their banking institutions than perhaps in the on-air market. But as I said, that's my suspicion. We have to unpack that further. I hope that's a satisfactory answer.
Okay, thank you. Any other question? Yes.
Yes. Thank you for the presentation, Liska. I wanted to find out, it's just how it works, data EQ. I wanted to know if the solution is on the same line as a meltwater. Does it do the same thing as a meltwater? And I wanted to also know if does it engage? So it picks up sentiments, it picks up, maybe you put in a word or the name of the organization, and then it pulls it up to you when comments are coming or when sentiments are being shared across all your social media platforms. Are you able to engage from the back to respond to these sentiments or these queries coming through your social media platforms through the back, just like some of these other sentiment tools solutions do? I just want to understand how data EQ works from the back. Do we need to integrate it into our social media platforms, or is a standalone system? How does it work? I just need to get an understanding. Thank you.
Thank you for that question. In a sense, it would be similar to something like a Mouthwater or Brand Watch, in that we can cover the needs for social listening. We've got an analytics tool for that. But our services go beyond that to exactly what you're talking about, honing in on priority conversations. So there's a tool specifically for customer service online across different platforms that can be integrated into internal tools that you can integrate WhatsApp or other sources as well, integrated into your CRM. And that also, it's a sort of a holistic engagement tool, so not just for service, but also for publishing online polls and surveys, or sort of customer satisfaction surveys, things like that. So our focus is specifically on improving the brand engagement and customer sentiment, not just listening and seeing what consumers are saying, but letting that have an effect. Where required, we also have, as you know, with this report that we've put together with Toboko, and we've got a suite of really sophisticated business analysts that help unpack and answer questions if need be as well. So there's obviously in-app reporting, but then, if you're wanting to delve deeper into various questions for your brand or the industry, that's also something that we support. Did that answer your question? Thank you.
There's another question.
Yeah. Thank you, Liska. I noticed that on the response rate, the scores was around the 30s. And for me, wondering, typically when you get issues, complaints, social media, you would think that entities would be running to resolve. So I want to know what is driving the low response rate from where you sit.
Thank you for that question. I think it broke up initially, but I think I got the gist of it. What's driving the low response rate in the Ghanaian banking market?
Yes.
Is that really? Okay. It's difficult to answer that without working, coming to have a look at the data with each bank. But I think on the one hand, it could be the lack of sufficient tools to be able to find and surface that, to get it to service teams. It could also be a lack of that tool not being able to find what we call indirect conversation. So consumers sometimes just talk about their bank and don't necessarily use the handle, if I can put it that way. So this conversation's happening and the brand might not necessarily see it. And so that, all of that needs to come in for the sort of less savvy consumer to also have a response. And then lastly, the other thing that could be happening is that those service agents are taking that response directly to a direct message, which is private. And that's not something that we've included here, because that's obviously private messaging and not public. So there's sort of a best practice there of closing the loop in the public platform and saying, thank you for your message, please check your DMs, or whatever the kind of standard response is that the brand decides. That then becomes sort of the public post that all consumers and the public can see that this person has had a response, but it's been dealt with privately. Does that answer your question?
Very good. Thank you. Okay, Sai, please go on. Okay, go on.
Hi, Liska. I think you've partly covered mine as well in the previous question that was asked, because I was going to say that, like you rightfully said, a lot of engagement is done behind the scenes on socials, right? Particularly for complaints. So my question was going to be, how do you then conclude in your report with regard to exactly what is happening? But I think you've mentioned that this is left out of your report that you've given us. Am I right?
Yes, so I think this would be step one, looking at responsiveness in the public platforms. Step two is for us to then engage and say, okay, well, let's unpack that further. Is it a case of, training the team on best practice in public, in the sort of public arena? Is it a case of implementing a tool that can actually help them find and respond appropriately? What is the problem? To be able to improve that, and that's partly why we're seeing that improved sentiment in the South African market, because we've been working with the South African banks and insurers for the last 6 years, and so I think that's starting to have, or has had that sort of effect. Does that answer your question?
It does. I work with Zenith Bank, and what we realize is in some cases where issues and complaints are close behind the scenes, you've got some customers who will come back on their page and state, that we've reached out to them. They state whether they are satisfied or not. This is what we do, but what is your advice for us as banks, where you don't have all the customers coming back on socials to say that the conversation has been taken a notch further, the bank has reached out to me in my inbox and they are investigating the issue, etc. What would you advise that we do to be able to turn this narrative around of what you're seeing as lack of responsiveness?
So I think one of the kind of issues, obviously, to answer specifically per bank, we'd have to come and have a look at your data specifically. But if I can give sort of a general answer to that we've seen with clients that we've worked with. Historically, these platforms have been treated for sort of community management. So it's somebody that is trained to do campaign responses and that kind of feedback, and to give a sort of very superficial answer, if I can give it that way. So they might put out campaign content or run a competition or whatever the case may be, and then consumers respond to that with operational pain points. I've tried your call center, no one's getting back to me, you've double billed me, whatever the problem is, and those agents aren't trained or equipped to deal with those kind of issues. So I think having a tool that is robust enough to work across different departments, that you can kind of route those complaints as and when needed to the different teams, or to beef up the training for those community management agents to be able to handle a more kind of diverse and more intricate set of queries. I think that's sort of behind the responsiveness. The first step is actually responding and making sure that consumers aren't missed. Then beyond that, actually improving the level of that response and quality of service.
Okay.
Does that?
Yes, you've answered that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I see a hand there. Please go ahead.
Yeah, Liska, thanks very much for that insightful presentation. My name is Stephen Hammond from GCB Bank. Now, we've done a banking sentiment survey for Ghana, but then you compared with South Africa, Kenya, UAE, and UK. I want to know why these selected countries and not countries within the sub-region where we can at least benchmark and compare the performance with similar cultural environment that we have. And select, you pick Kenya and then UAE in your study.
It's a good question. The honest answer is that we have clients in those regions, and so we have developed research that benchmarks other banks or insurers or telcos in those regions. We're starting to roll out studies in more regions with clients where we work across Africa. So we've got some clients that obviously operate in multiple regions. We would do that kind of research for them and benchmark each region in their own sort of private reports. Obviously, we don't publish those, but I think that's just the data that we have at the moment that we've included.
Okay, thank you. Please.
Hi, Leska. My name is Adino from the Customer Experience Professionals Association, Ghana. I wanted to know whether you have found any correlation between the reputational aspects that you surface and the operational bits. So, for example, if a bank has a good reputation, are we seeing more positive responses to their challenges? Does that make sense? So, if you had a bank, so Bank A, for example, has very good responses in terms of their reputation, does it show in the way they respond to the challenges the bank has from what you have seen in your research?
Yes, I think we see both. Less of what you're referring to now. I think the best example that comes to mind is Capitec in South Africa, who managed to build up a really good rapport with their customers, and not just sort of a reputational level, but actually consumer education. So consumers knew exactly how to handle the app or handle transaction, whatever. So what we saw is where other consumers would come and ask for assistance or have issues navigating the platform or whatever it might be, before an agent could actually reply, consumers would jump on and go, oh, I did this and this and this, and they'd sort of start to support each other. There was almost like this community supporting Capitec and their own consumers, if that makes sense. I think that drove a lot of positivity for them, and one of the reasons why they, for a number of years, were leading the South African banking sentiment. But I think what we see a lot more of is the inverse of that, where brands are trying to maintain their reputation and put out comms to drive awareness about investments or whatever initiatives they're putting out, products, promoting services, and yet there's sort of an underlying unhappiness from consumers with pain points around their experience that hasn't been addressed. And so consumers then respond to that negatively and say, but now you're promoting this product without having, but you're still double billing me, or whatever the case may be. So we often see more of that, where banks don't hear the voice of customer and allow that to affect change in whatever department it needs to within the business. The consumer sort of keeps them accountable and will keep bringing it up, until it is attended to. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Please, the online audience, do we have any question? Tech team, any question from online team? Any question? No. Liska, I have one question myself, which is a follow-up to the question around how we determine the countries to compare Ghana to. So what I want to find out from your experience, how do you take care of the context of culture in impacting these results? Because in one culture, people may be very willing to talk about and complain a lot, whereas in another, they may not. So how do we account for that in explaining the results?
I think that's a very valid point, and perhaps part of why we see more negativity in the UK, for example, than we do in the African markets. And I think, the legislation around how consumers engage in these public platforms is also evolving. In some regions, consumers are being fined and facing legal action. So these platforms have very strict terms and conditions in how brands and companies like ourselves are allowed to use that data. It can't be used for surveillance and things like that. So I'm not sure exactly how to answer your question, other than to say that I think it's a valid point, and I think it's something that's definitely worth considering when looking at this, and when dealing with regulators in the region, and addressing things like consumer education. What are the right channels that they can go to be able to get support and help if they feel that they're not being treated fairly? I think that's probably the best I can give you today, David. I'm not sure if that's a satisfactory answer, but
no
happy
worries.
to discuss it further.
Thank you very much. So we are almost at the end of our program. Again, I ask that you do the scan code and then give us feedback. And if your institution, and which we'll be very much interested in, wants us to come and engage and provide detailed reports to you, we'll be willing to do that. So please record that. And then we also started with breakfast. So in case you've not had your 10, please, the next room, when we are done, you can please go there and have breakfast before you leave. Thank you very much. On that note, I want to call on Destiny to come and give us closing remarks. Destiny is one of our partners. Let's give him a hand as he comes upstage.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Before I give my closing remarks, I think we can give another round of applause for our presenters and time well spent this morning. What are the messages we are going away with this morning? I think we're all reminded of the fact that customer experience continues to evolve. We've been doing a bit around customer service for now, but there is still more that we need to do when it comes to the transformative aspect. Again, from the survey, the banking survey as done in Ghana, those 5 key issues that were discussed this morning, the issue of speed, we still value quick turnaround in our branches, a lot of work done with digital channels, but many of us still prefer to have some amount of contact with our bankers. Our concerns related to the IT controls or cyber controls, or are they more to do with the support we get from our internet service providers, so that together we are able to offer that experience that the customer wants? We also discussed issues surrounding predictability. The customers are saying they want those surprises when it comes to our people, the processes, and the technology that we have deployed. We're also reminded of the fact that knowledgeable employees are key to our customers. Of course, they want to deal with people who know about their business, people who are ready to engage with them, and then offer them the solutions they are looking for. Easy access was also one of the key reminders from the survey. Contactability was key, and they will want to have easy way to get to talk to you with what they are expecting. They are expecting you as bankers to have your staff show interest in what they are doing and not to provide the bare minimum of service they come asking for. So engage employees and then ensure that you are satisfying your customers. We also, at a point, discuss PwC's point of view when it comes to these 5 matters. We reminded ourselves that when it comes to speed, upskilling our staff is key. When it comes to predictability, the generational AIs and all the tools that are available, we should make more use of them to be able to satisfy our customers. Easy access, regulatory balance was reminded of in terms of doing everything that we want to do to satisfy our customers, but it still be reminded that there are limits and the regulator will always want us to be observing those. And when it comes to engaging our staff, we were reminded of putting ourselves in the shoe of our customers, the journey map, and ensuring that the customer is key in whatever we are doing. On the banking sentiments presentation. A promising start for Ghana, we were told, comparing to some of our developed countries. But we are reminded again of the fact that that should be put in context in terms of their products sophistications that those two regions may be having. Doing well when it comes to the reputational sentiment, but a lot more that we need to do when it comes to the operational feedback. Positive response when it comes to the reputational areas, but again, a negative sentiment when it comes to the operational sentiment. We're not surprised by the fact that a lot of the tractions we get on the internet has to do with customer complaints. And we are here, and we are also not surprised with the fact that when it comes to ESG, the sentiments and the tractions are quite low. I want to end my presentation by again reminding all of us that both presentations, the one done by PwC Ghana and our colleagues at Data EQ, we are available to drill down, and then we look forward to hearing from you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Destiny. On that note, all too soon, we've come to the end of today's breakfast meeting. We are open and available for you to engage. And once again, thank you. And we are confident that it was worth a while. And when we call you the next time, you'll be willing to come and spend your money with us. Have a blessed rest of week. Thank you. And please don't forget breakfast in the other room.